Greetings, shalom. This is a big thing. It's a big understanding, and it's connected to, well, everything, but it's connected to so many big things that are important. And it just can't be seen unless it's sought after for and given. To understand anything in His Word must be given from above. But the apostle saying something that once again can't be understood will not make any sense to the natural man apart from the Creator, but I'll read some of it. Also showing and teaching what the Father did through Messiah and the plan of salvation and what that will do and what it did and what it will do worked out through time. But it did already, because it's as if it's already done coming from the Creator. We even read, how is it said? Like what is spoken is as if it's already done. But yet from our sight and perspective and what we see, it's not literally done, but yet it is. That's a contradiction with the letters. Therefore, it will sound like a contradiction, and it will be foolishness to those who can't see at all. His truth is foolishness to those who are blind. Instead of condemning and judging the Creator's word, someone should take it as a sign that something is not being understood at all if it's a contradiction only in someone's mind. If it looks evil, stupid, a contradiction, that's a sign that the understanding is not there, and that's a sign someone should ask. But people don't do that, the many. They judge His word from the throne and start attacking, condemning, dividing, slandering, accusing, making things up, replacing the truth with the lie. And that's what's done in haste, hastily. We read, whoever does not act in haste, work in haste, will not be put to shame. Whoever believes in Him will not be put to shame and not act hastily. It requires much patience from Him to even get understanding for any given thing. It requires real patience. It tests that so that patience can grow. That's what He does. To test also patience, for something to be understood requires patience, and those that don't have it and never do it will never receive the understanding, will never get the good things from Him, will never see Him, the truth, what His word means, won't see life. Right now, if someone is doing that work continually, because it requires real patience, sometimes a long time before receiving something, sometimes instantly, and in between. In Romans 5, therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world, and death through sin, because sin causes death, and thus death spread to all men because all sinned. Why did it spread to all men? Because all sinned. It didn't. The false image, the false teaching of this, the lie that looks the same for the image, this is what it is. It's to say that death spread to all men because of some kind of disease, because of some kind of spreading, and somebody just caught the cold and happened to catch Adam. And it just spread this way. That's the image, that's the lie, that's the image of the true. And an image is the false image of the true understanding, is to say that it just spread and it's Adam's fault and blame it on him and he just spread everything. No, it gives us the reason why immediately. Death spread to all men. Why? Because all sinned. Because it didn't just do that. Everyone sinned. That's why it did that. They were no different. We were no different. And nobody was better than Adam and Eve. It spread, but it is connected to because all sinned. They all sinned for real. No one can say they haven't. That's wild nonsense and evil. I never sinned. But is that what the heart is doing? Isn't that what the crooked heart is doing? No, not the words to be said out loud, but what is someone that doesn't believe? What is corruption? The heart believes that it doesn't sin, hasn't acknowledged the sins to the Creator at all, that it's Adam and Eve, a sinner, corrupt, evil, backwards in all things. For until the law, sin was in the world. What does that sound like? Sounds like there was no law. It's not what it means. But there is something true about there not being a law, because it's an understanding of how the law worked through it being revealed the way it was. Before Moses, the law wasn't revealed in the same way, but it existed in a scripture that's very simple, powerful to prove that through his word is Abraham in Genesis kept the Father's charge, commandments, laws, precepts, judgments, a few different things, not the commandments, the laws, the judgments, and whatever else we read, kept the laws before Moses, long before Abraham kept the Father's laws we're reading. What was Abraham doing? Obeying the Father's voice. A type of the true, an old covenant saint that he moves his people to obey. And Abraham moves around from place to place, going through enemies. It's like traveling, with an end goal is how his way is also seen. Traveling with an end goal constantly. Now and to come. A hope now and to come. A hope for tomorrow, not just to come way out in the distant future. Abraham's the example of faith and the teaching of faith. But before Messiah, there was no reality in the true faith, but only the image and type of faith, only walking with the Father in spirit and in truth, but not truly in spirit and in truth, but the type of it. To hear his voice literally is to only understand the commandments literally and carnally, and naturally at best. It's only to do what someone thinks it means by hearing the literal words, and then they hear the command and does what they think it means. That is all mankind. So then the Father, this is what he did. That's his plan. That's how he did it. It's how he wanted to do it. And he did no sin through this. The Father has done this and can do this without any actual sin coming from him, without doing any actual evil to people. In his heart, he already did it, but he can do it to bring out that he always can and is doing that. He can do all of that and did without any sin while man is in sin, in the heart, in spirit, corrupt, the mind and heart, everything corrupt within. But before Moses, in Genesis, it's not missing anything like people imply in this world, and then start getting sucked into these other false books that I would say on a good day has no benefit. And anything worse than that, even deceitful, corrupting, spreading leaven, cancer through these other corrupt things that will contradict his word. Because if it's not his word, it's only going to attack his word. It's there to be mixed up to destroy truth. That's what it's there for. As the enemy always loves, creating the image of the true and replacing the truth by becoming the truth himself with something that's mixed up in a lie so that it destroys someone. If it's a lie, that's what it'll do in someone. And that's how these other books can only add to people's destruction, through mixing and confusion, contradicting his word in all kinds of places. And I'm speaking of real contradictions, not letters only contradicting, but actual contradictions not just sounding like it, but actually contradicting with no resolve. And so then Abraham walked with the Creator. Like we read, Enoch walked with the Creator. He was not. His life was taken. Didn't go to heaven. His life was taken. He was not. Father took his life. That's a teaching too. As we read elsewhere in places with that wording, was not, and Joseph was not, someone was not, because they believed he was dead. But that's a separate thing now. We even read, what was the apostles' understanding given to him? Is he a liar? Doesn't see, has no clue, wasn't given? Because he mentions Enoch of Genesis and that these all died apart from the promise. And they died as examples of faith for our admonition. But the light wasn't true and there. It wasn't revealed to mankind yet. Father is always the same, but it wasn't revealed to mankind yet, but it was kept hidden until Messiah. And even now is hidden to those that still don't believe. But it's being revealed to those who believe, of which it was hidden before. All things were hidden concerning the real things, the true light, spiritual heavenly things, things of the heart were hidden. Nobody could have it. It was sealed up and shut up in a book until it was to be unsealed. Who can unseal the scrolls? We read Messiah can. And John is getting worried. Oh no, who's going to do this? This is not good. This is sad. This is no good. Who's going to open the seals? What does it mean? This is important, isn't it? How will we ever know? But then we read, don't worry, John. That's why we read that. Because the Lamb is able to. Because the Father gave him all power, authority. But it's the Father doing it. But it's Messiah doing it also. Because he has been given all things to open the seal, to open the seals. And this happens through revelation of seeking to do his will. This doesn't happen all at once, but he's constantly opening the seals, a process for those that want to do his will and seek these things, his truth, and how to keep his commandments and what his word means and how to keep it and live it, not just talk it. Not just talk it in a mirror, pointing at self constantly, guilty of every accusation it does to others, which is not righteous judgment, but evil, condemning judgment from the heart. For until the law, sin was in the world. It existed. Man's a sinner. He's not saying or teaching that no one is literally sinning. That's all man is doing is sinning. But for until the law, sin was in the world. But sin is not imputed where there is no law. There was no requirement like it would be when it was revealed through Moses under the old covenant. Where is the old covenant? Where is it before Moses? It wasn't. It couldn't be. It's a contradiction if it were to be. It's not. No one's going to find it. This other covenant is simply the Father walking with his people, teaching them the way. Before the law was revealed in the way it was through Moses, that Father gave his law, the very law and words of the Creator. But the law did exist because Abraham kept the laws and commandments we read long before the law was revealed. So the understanding isn't that there was no law, literally. Father doesn't change. There's always the spiritual law that never changes because the law is connected to who the Father is, not the cold, dead stone letters by themselves, but what his word and laws mean is the Creator. It's who he is. Do not commit adultery is who the Creator is. Do not murder is who the Creator is. Do not steal is who the Creator is. But it's coming from that other side. It's coming from obeying commands to do or not to do, which is the same as saying keeping his commandments. To keep, you shall not commit adultery. and to know what the good thing is, to know to know what not committing adultery is. It reveals that when it's given, to know who the Creator is. He doesn't commit adultery. He doesn't do that himself, ever. He doesn't murder. He's a righteous judge. Murder is a wicked heart that wants to destroy out of an evil heart. Father has no pleasure in the death of the wicked. He never does man's murder. But he's a righteous judge, and he does give, he does take away, even life. And he has the right to do that. Who can stop him? That does not mean he's doing evil, but people will accuse the Father of doing evil. They're not the Creator. Did they forget that he does whatever he pleases? He's in the heavens. He does what he pleases. Who can stop him? We read. It's a teaching. Who can stop him? No one. We might as well believe and go along with the truth and obey him, because nobody can fight against him unless they like death and want death, unless they want to be a slave forever to sin and be in death and bondage with zero hope, zero faith, zero life, while alive. Because what profit is it if someone destroys and loses their own soul? What profit is it? All the carnal things and carnal gain. The person's dead. But the prodigal son, we read, he was dead, now he's alive. He was lost, now he's found. Can't people see that Messiah is not teaching literal death here? Because in the parable, he never literally died. And yet we read, he was dead, but now he's alive. It's real death. The word spiritual always comes to mind, a spiritual death. But what that death is and to see it is, that's just the word. What else to say? Heavenly death, spiritual death. It's not just an empty word to say spiritual death. It's real, and it's connected to everything and all his truth. And there's a way to see it, and it's no good. It's a real death. It's not just a word to make one look wise, as people do in the church world and in this world. They say that when they don't know something. They say that when they're stuck, to try to look good so that they can escape that moment looking wise, and not found as not knowing and caught as a sinner that's teaching lies and doing evil. People will use that word despitefully, like a whore, just to look wise. So then they make themselves sound like a believer. They make themselves sound like true believers by using that word, spiritual. To all the wolves in sheep clothing in the world, his people that truly believe don't use that word because of that stupid, worthless, carnal reason for self-preservation and to look wise before people, or to be promoted and esteemed by men, to escape something because there's no knowledge, and try to hide that someone doesn't have the knowledge. And using the word like that is sin. It's handling his word deceitfully. Now that's why he says, but sin is not imputed. Imputed means someone does the sin and the Father counts it for sin. It's not covered, and a judgment will come for it, for that imputed sin. But look what we read next. Until the law was in the world, but sin is not imputed where there's no law. Because there's not a law requiring man or man requiring his own self to keep the law. That requirement is not in Messiah at all, to do it ourselves. And yet we need to keep his laws. Who can see? Because where do you even begin when it's always sounding contradicting? All his truth sounds contradicting to the wicked, because it is to them, because it's foolishness to them, because they can't see his language, the spiritual Hebrew, the gift of tongues, to speak his word. No one can speak it from the heart. As a baby, can a baby talk? So not even a believer has tongues to speak at the beginning, but someone should ask What's to stop someone from asking for all to receive these gifts? And the Father gives more in some areas than maybe someone else, but it doesn't mean that a believer only has one gift and should only have one gift. But it kind of sounds like the apostle is saying that's so. It's not. Someone should have all the gifts, but maybe someone has more in one than the other. And that's how he distributes to the body, his people, these gifts, because it depends what time it is also. Because it could just be because someone's a young believer and they don't have the gift of tongues. So then these will exist while other believers do, because they've been a believer for longer. That's what it's accounting for, is that not everyone's in the same exact place. How could they be in the same place if someone believed 20 years before another? One is going to be way bigger of a tree and mature, and the other is just barely sprouted. How could it have the gift of tongues, for example, to speak, to be able to speak his truth and speak out of the Father's Spirit? It can't be done in truth without him giving. So how is it that false prophets seem to be able to speak? They're not. They just look like it. They don't speak from the Spirit of the Father, from the heart, in truth. It's a script. It's acted. It's not coming from the Father, like we read in Jeremiah. I have not sent these prophets. I have not spoken to them. They've never heard from me, but they come in my name as if they have heard from him. They lie. Come in his name by claiming they have heard from him, and they never heard from him. Messiah said, you never heard him at any time or seen his form. You've never seen him or heard from him at any time. He's saying to the unbelievers, their whole life, they've never heard from the Creator. That's what Messiah is saying in truth and teaching, because it's the truth when he said that to them, because that's mankind right there. He was speaking to the religious leaders. They have never heard from Elohim at any time, but they do claim to believe. Can someone see how fiery and hot this is? This is going to set someone on fire. They don't know who Messiah is. He's just some weak little coward or something to people that just accepts sin and lawlessness, through the Christianity's Messiah, dumping and literally teaching there's no law. But then they'll say, no, we're not saying that. They'll just say they're not saying that real quick when their doctrines teach that there is no law, because they don't understand it, because their heart doesn't have the law. It's in lawlessness, the lawlessness that the Messiah spoke of. But you are lawlessness, he said to them. And we read, many will say, Master, Master, but he will tell them, I never knew you, workers of lawlessness. No law. You can't say lawlessness without there being a law. That's stupid. That's like saying there's no book. Well, let me give me a second now. What's an example? So a book exists, and let's say it does exist, and the law exists. But then he says, you're in law. I don't know. It's when I start thinking too much, it's not working right now to give the example. I'm having a hard time coming up instantly with it. So I won't try right now. But I see what I want to say, see it in my mind, but it's hard to come up with something to say it. It's simple enough. How could lawlessness be said without law? It's not possible to be lawlessness if there literally was no law. Lawlessness only exists because of law existing. Lawlessness is not, the definition of lawlessness is not having a law. Lawlessness. The meaning of lawlessness is not the lack of any law. It's breaking the law. That's what lawlessness means. It means the law exists, and it's the breaking of the law is lawlessness. It doesn't keep laws. It's not nothingness. It's not the lack of any law. How simple is that? But Christianity teaches the heart that there is no law. There's nothing to truly keep. We're not supposed to keep his commandments. But then they will say, yes, we are. They'll just make his people look stupid constantly. They try to. And just lie real quick. Just lie just like that. Say one thing once, 5 minutes later saying the exact opposite thing and saying, no, we didn't. No, we didn't, or no, I didn't. Constantly doing that. When in real life, people get caught by the truth and they proved what they believe in their heart in that moment. Then they quickly say, no, I don't believe that. They just cover it up real quick. Think that works. Just lie real quick. The doctrines prove that they don't believe there's any law to keep, commandments to keep. Christianity's doctrines prove that. Their doctrines, when discerned, means lawlessness. Hypocrisy is lawlessness also. There's no such thing as righteousness in hypocrisy. If it's hypocritical, it is lawless also. There's no such thing as being truly hypocritical and lawful at the same time. Truly being lawful is to not be a hypocrite also. It's all connected in one. It's either both or none. But it sounds like there was something like no law. And it's hard to put into words what the understanding is and what I'm seeing. It has to be given to see. Because people will assume we're not aware or something of simple earthly things like contradicting like that. Very aware that it's contradicting literally with the letters and sounds contradicting. Very well aware of that. But people they hear truth, that's a common attack and accusation, right away. Saying, what are you, stupid? You're contradicting. Flip that around. What are you? Are you stupid? What do they say it means? And what's their example of living it? What do they say it means? Sin is not imputed when there is no law. Nevertheless, why do we read nevertheless death reigned? How could there be death and sin reigning? Because we read earlier there. Therefore, just as through one man's sin entered the world, and death through sin, death to all men because all sinned. So there is real sinning. There's real sinning. Nevertheless, death reigned from Adam to Moses. How, if there's no law and nothing to break? Because it doesn't mean there's no law. And people don't even test anything in there. That was a test right now. Can't people see in there that something's wrong with their doctrine, with their heart, and what they believe? Can't they see that this just proves something is wrong with their belief and what they're doing, not the Creator's word, but it's bringing up that there's a problem, a contradiction with their doctrine, with his word. If there's no law, how do you be lawless? How do you sin when the definition of sin in his word is transgression of the law? If there's no law, how do you sin? It's just nothingness. There's nothing to say you're a sinner. No law, that means there's no lawless. You can't be lawless or sin. But look what we read. Nevertheless, death reigned from Adam to Moses. Because it doesn't mean there's no literal law. I don't know what to call this. A precept, maybe, about how this is working. What it means that the law was revealed and how it's working and what it means truly. In a way, it was no law because it wasn't revealed and commanded. And the old covenant wasn't there yet. Began, under the law in Moses. But the fathers, or with Abraham, for example, through the natural first, walking with the Creator. And it is a simple thing because the only understanding man has of adultery is literal adultery. That's it without the Creator. He can say words, he can use the word spiritual, but he doesn't see it. Therefore, if someone doesn't commit literal adultery, they think they're righteous for doing it. That's not adultery. So you can break adultery, keep breaking that command to not commit adultery every single day while not committing adultery. That's what it ends up sounding like. Someone murders every day while they don't murder, because they murder spiritually while not murdering carnally. Two sides to the Father's word and sword, the natural and spiritual, and they both cut and destroy. When a sword goes into someone's gut, how can't it be both sides? Both of them cut flesh. One for our salvation for those who believe, and the other for their destruction for those that don't believe. The same sword is separating his people from not his people. It's separating, cutting, dividing. As Abraham is told to cut the animals, the ones we read of, to cut them in two. Why do we read Messiah says, you will be cut in two and thrown with the hypocrites? There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So there's some kind of connection with Abraham cutting the beasts in two. It's a judgment. It's a separation of beast. In order to be alive in Messiah, we have to die. And cutting something to death, splitting it, is a death. So death is working in us, in believers, but death is working also in unbelievers. It's death both ways. But one death is leading to life, the other is just death. Cutting in two is a judgment on mankind, because the animals, when it's the discernment, are representing people also. So the judgment is cut in two. And a beast, a man, is divided and cut and destroyed. We need to be separated from the old man from the new man now, the carnal from the spiritual, even for one individual within themselves, a war within our own members, because the old man is dying, which is enmity against the Creator. The new man, his spirit in us, is at war with that old man. So there's a division, and they cannot be one. It has to be separated continually. And one has to be dying. So there's a death working, because the apostle says we carry around the dying of Yehoshua, and also the living, both, but carrying around in the body the dying of Messiah. That spiritual death of the old man, from denying self and having it die more and more, is separated perfectly between the Father's Spirit, the new man, in believers, and cut in two. But the unbelief that's cut in two is working for their destruction. It's separating them into carnality, to be filled up with their own works and their own lusts and sins as the judgment that the Father judges, handing them over to whatever the sin is to complete them so they can be judged, so the Father can show he's a righteous judge, that he hates evil and loves good and is good. Nevertheless, death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over those who had not sinned according to the likeness of the transgression of Adam, who is a type of him who was to come, Messiah. Adam is a type of Messiah. We read it. He wasn't the true yet. He wasn't the new man. This was not available. Adam is the old man, and Adam represents the old man in everyone also. This doesn't make Adam fake, as some people teach and imply, sounding spiritual, and then people will say, what does that mean? Adam didn't exist? No, it doesn't mean Adam. It means he existed. But he's also representing and meaning something greater than himself, as his word teaches. He's a type of Messiah, and representing the old man in sin, which is in death and condemnation for sin and unbelief. A type of him who was to come, but the free gift is not like the offense. It's not like it. For if by the one man's offense many died, that's everyone. Because we read simply, Adam sinned, and sin spread through Adam, spread to all because all sinned. All, everyone. So the word many is being used for all, because it's not meaning what someone implies secretly or openly. What do you mean? Does it not mean all because it says many? No, it's not meaning that here. It's just said this way. Why can't the Father do that? Why can't the apostle do that? It is many. Many is billions of people many? Yes, it's many. So that it's just many. It does not mean not all. It's not implying that secretly. For if by one man's offense many died, meaning all died, but there's many. Sum of all of humanity is many. It's everyone. Much more the grace of Elohim and the gift of the grace of the one man, Yehoshua Messiah, abounded to many, the same many, the all. And the gift is not like that which came through the one who sinned. For the judgment which came from one offense resulted in condemnation. Since the beginning of creation and sin, man has already been condemned long ago by the Creator as a determined judgment. In unbelief and in sin, someone's already condemned. No one has to condemn anyone for that to be so. It's in the death and condemnation from sin, which is connected to the old covenant, which is self-keeping the law, trying to keep the law and be righteous of self. But the free gift which came from many offenses resulted in justification. For if by the one man's offense death reigned through the one, much more, not just equal. If it was equal, it would do this also, but it's more than equal. Much more those who receive the abundance of grace and of the gift of righteousness will reign in life through the one, Yehoshua Messiah. Is the Father partial? It won't apply to all humanity, but the sin applied to all humanity. But what Messiah did and what Father did through Messiah won't reverse the curse for the many in due time. It's not for the many. He didn't die for all. It won't be worked out. It won't be for many. It won't be for the all, just for very few forever. Their gospel's death. Their power is death. And they're under the power and grip of death and a slave to sin. And this is the cold, hard truth of religion, the harlot. This is the work they do. They are proclaiming death. They are taking glee in death forever, everlastingly. That death will have always been stronger, so much stronger than what the Father did through Messiah. The sin will always be so much stronger than the righteous work and righteous act forever. That means forever according to their doctrine, because people will be condemned, tortured, the many, most of the creation, forever. Therefore, death always stumps and totally tramples down anything good in life. It is the power of death, the false gospel. It is proclaiming death, the false gospel, which is what? Good news. Good news for death for all humanity, save a very few. Tortured forever. That's the good news. That's what Father means by good news. Good news means death for all mankind forever. That's what they say. They have to. Their doctrine says so. They say so. They don't have to say the words for this to be true. Their heart believes this. Their heart is doing this. They'll support the lie if confronted, only further proving that this is true about many, that they do believe this and proclaim this. This is what they really teach people's hearts. All their doctrine is leaven. It's designed to get in someone and corrupt them, to work death. If it's not cut off, it'll keep on growing until it's leavened, fully lumped in the oven. With a little bit of testing and heat, it grows. So when the Father puts a test on anyone in the world to test some kind of work, when someone sins and fails the test, that test is a hot testing. The heat is a testing. It puts heat spiritually onto someone in real life, in the real world. And someone sins, that testing grows the sin. When we don't believe in the Creator or trust in Him, but are working of self-righteousness, the sin grows through the test. The test makes someone more of a sinner because it fails the test and sins only apart from Him. That's why it's thrown in the oven, the bread. And the heat leavens it. Without heat, it wouldn't be leavened. The corruption wouldn't grow unto the full corruption without testing, heat. And the sunlight is heat also, and that's a testing. In Revelation, we read that sun is going to be so hot, and people blaspheme the Creator because of the heat of the sun is hot. It's a heavy yoke, heavy bondage in sin, not able to bear it. This is death. This is the condemnation in unbelief and sin. It's a heat, it's a pressure, and testing doesn't make someone. It's not doing that by itself, the testing, but in that someone can't do good. The testing, the heat makes someone sin because of man's no ability to do what's right and overcome sin and do the good in the testing. Therefore, one man's testing is for growth, for life, for those that believe, and the same testing is for someone's growth in death for those who don't believe. The same sword, both sides working. The same thing is working in separating life and those who believe from death, those who don't believe. The same work, the same sword, the same testing, separating everyone, separating the sheep from the wolves right now. It's already began. It already is. It was, and it is to come. The abundance of grace and the gift of righteousness will reign in life, not death, through the one, Yeshua Messiah. Therefore, as through one man's offense, judgment came to all men. It came to all without partiality. Father already judged Adam and Eve and even the enemy as a cursed way in the devil. Adam and Eve could make all the excuses, justify their sin, blame it on someone else. Nevertheless, a judgment came anyways, teaching the judgment comes anyways. It doesn't work to try to blame it on someone else. Someone will receive real judgment for their real sins right now. It won't work to blame it on someone else or justify it and make excuses. So we can't be doing that anymore. Making excuses, no accountability, justifying everything, blaming it on someone or something else. Can't be doing that. Even so, through one man's righteous act, free gift came to all men. The same all. Did the judgment come to all men through one man's offense and sin? It says to all men, resulting in condemnation. Even so, through one man's righteous act, the free gift came to all men. Just because it hasn't been literally worked through all mankind yet doesn't make this a lie. This is what the Father did. This is the plan. This is the good news. This is what it will do and has done. In that, with the Father, it's already as good as done because of how sure it is, because that's prophets. To him, it's already as good as done, but it's also, from our understanding and what we see, we don't see it literally finished and done. It's going to work through time, through the ages. That's the truth. It is for all. It's not a joke that Messiah died for all, and it won't have been in vain. Just because it looks like it for most right now doesn't mean it's in vain and not true. Because someone looks at the dumb image, says it doesn't look true right now, therefore it must not be so because it looks like that to me. Because it wants the corrupt thing to be true. It wants its doctrines to be true that are wicked, that justify sin. It wants people to burn in fire forever and be condemned forever with no way out, tortured forever. It wants that. It wants those things to be so, and out of a deceitful, evil heart. It wants all of that to be so for whoever it hates as an enemy. It wants that for all its enemies. Why it has the doctrines and will support it dearly, all the way to the end bitterly. The corrupt, wicked gospel of condemnation and death to all mankind, save a few. So it came to all men, resulting in justification of life. For as by one man's disobedience, many, there's the many again, that's all. How clear is it that it's meaning all? It's just, we're reading many because it's true. That's it. It's many. But it's all though. His word plainly says it's all sinned, all under the judgment. For as by one man's disobedience many were made sinners, so also by one man's obedience, Messiah, the fulfillment of the type of Adam, reversing the curse, dying to the death of Adam, flipping that 6 upside down to a 9 and dying to the death, where death itself is cast into the lake of fire and destroyed. Destroying death, which means life. It means life to destroy all death. There's no death anymore. Therefore, only life is the result of destroying all death. The last enemy to be destroyed is death. It's not finished yet, and they don't teach the truth in the church world. The good news is to be coming out of death right now for believers. That's the good news for believers right now. And it's the good news of things to come. So it's to spread his actual true gospel of the good things that someone can have and receive right now if they believe and pass from death to life and have life. But that's not it. It also is to learn all of his word and keep his commandments continually. Summing it up in a few words, that's not it. It's not everything. Also, it's not it. It doesn't mean it's an easy way. It's not an easy way. Read, it's a difficult, narrow way. Doesn't make all these other things a lie now because someone wants the easy thing and then therefore will teach the easy and corrupt thing, deceive others and destroy them utterly. Faith, the lack of faith is destruction. And if someone's faith is being attacked, that's someone wanting death for you. Someone's doing the works of causing doubt. They are wanting to destroy you with their literal heart, wanting to destroy you utterly, spiritually, at the very least, which is murder. Wanting to murder and destroy people through their gospel of wicked death, the bad news for all time. Zero hope for most people forever is their gospel. Say it straight, church world. Say what it really is. Zero hope for most people forever. Don't you use the majority rules all the time with the numbers? Don't they use the numbers majority to try to prove something is true because of the numbers and majority? Well, the majority are going to be condemned forever and tortured forever. The vast majority. Therefore, your gospel isn't the 0.01%. It's the 99.9%. 0.01, not the 0.01, but the 99.99, whatever the number literally is perfectly. That's their gospel. It's the gospel of whatever the majority is. Don't they know that whatever they dish out is dished back to them for a judgment? That whatever they measure is measured back to someone? So let's measure back what they do with other things constantly with numbers. Measure back their gospel according to their measure back onto them. Now you're going to change your law and your corruption. Now you're going to say the good news is called good news because of the 0.01% now, but you don't do that with other things. Now you say it's based on the extreme minority, so extreme. 1%, 2, 3, whatever the number is, they say, such a small few people compared to everyone to be saved and everyone else condemned forever. Such a huge majority number and population and percentage. It's the gospel of death for most people, and is the gospel of death and message of death and condemnation forever. They can't call it the good news and truth. Calling it good news based on the 1% now. Now they choose in partiality to say that the minority is what something is, and then the majority is dumped and ignored. Father just ignored and dumped billions of people for a tiny fraction of a people now. Now partiality is kicking in crazy strong, which is a wicked sin, which is evil. For as by one man's disobedience many were made sinners, so also by one man's obedience many will be made righteous. But the good news is that someone can become this right now, becoming this now, and not excuse me, out in the distant future, having nothing to do with, not just for not having to do with anything in someone's life. When does someone need saving? After they die? Right now, someone needs saving and belief in the truth. Right now, they need to come out of their death, the misery, the darkness, the shadow of death. What value, what good to have nothing to do with right now, but somewhere out in the future, in, long after you die? What is that? That's escaping. It's wanting to escape reality. Can they escape the condemnation and judgment of Gehenna? Messiah said. What, you can think you can escape the Father's judgment right now? Nobody can escape the judgment right now. We're trying to put it off out past your life so that it doesn't apply to you. It's not working. You're in death. That those who do this, they're in death for doing it. Nobody's telling them. How are they going to come out of it? How are they going to hear the truth if everyone keeps giving the lie? Moreover, the law entered that the offense might abound. Why did the law be revealed the way it was? So that sin increases, so that it can show. So the Father shows that sin is exceedingly sinful and increases so that it can abound. Moreover, the law entered that the offense might abound. What do they think that means? Saying it straight, plainly, simply, so that it can show what man is and contrast man's righteousness and wickedness with the Father's righteousness, to make it exceedingly sinful and show that man is sinful and can do no good. It's part of why the law was revealed the way it was. But where sin abounded, grace abounded much more. How could he have grace without there being condemnation, death, and under no favor? How could he show what his grace is and who he is and the good things he is to the few now and to the many in due time, without there being the perfect opposite, the evil, or the death, the condemnation? It wouldn't be grace. How could it be grace and mercy and favor to learn and see that this is good, this is what he's doing, this is who the Father is? How would he show that that's who he is if there was no such thing as the law being revealed to show sin exceedingly, to show what condemnation and death is, to show what sin is? So many reasons to know the difference between good and evil, to show what these things are. But it's also so he can show what grace is. The good in contrast to the dark, evil. If it was already all one thing, how could there would be no contrast? It's like, where are the stars when the sun is out? You would never see it. You would never know what they look like and what they look like spiritually, representing what it looks like, the outward as a type of the inward and true, or an image, but teaching something spiritually within. How would you see what stars are when it's only light? How would someone see what Father's light is if that's all they knew and it was only light? You wouldn't see what it is to shine in a dark world. You wouldn't see what a light in the world looks like at all. You wouldn't see this amazing thing in such a dark world, to see a shining light. How would anybody see it? So he's showing that also, to see who the Father is through working through his people as Messiah the first, the Father's light and his Spirit in Messiah. He's a light in the world, something that no one else had at the time, because he was the only begotten Son, the only one born from above that had the Father's Spirit and actually kept his word, unlike anyone ever before, in the heart. Not because Messiah could do it of himself, or because he's better than everyone else of himself through pride and boasting, false, wicked, prideful boasting, but because the Father's working in him, because they're the Father's works working in Messiah. Messiah said so. It's not my works. These are the Father's works. This proves the Father, who he is and that he exists. The works prove that. That's why the enemy hates it so much, hates believers with a vengeance, because it's the very proof of the Creator. and that his word is true, and that there is a possible way to keep it and not be in the same constant wicked hypocrisy, but actually growing and learning and coming out of it. It's also showing that there is a way and that nobody can make an actual excuse, especially after they see it, especially after they see a light shining in the world. That was the proof, because it's real light. Can't fake it. Can't fake real for real, but masquerading is faking it. But that light that it masquerades is not real light. It's just a masquerade. But you can't fake what's real, though. Someone can masquerade as a light in the world, but it's still darkness in reality. But when a light comes, it's real, and it pushes back darkness and exposes it for real, something that an unbeliever can never do because he doesn't have any light in him. He can never do this real thing. He can never expose people's sins in the heart through the good way, through the truth, through the light shining and exposing darkness. Could never do that. A false believer cannot do that because they have no light in them, but they masquerade as lights so that they create the image of light, so that in people's mind they see light because they created an image, always remembering the picture of the projector is putting an image on the wall or on the screen, not forgetting that the image isn't real. It's not real. It doesn't matter if it looks like light. It's not true light. It's all the difference in the world. The difference between a believer and unbeliever, the enemy and the creator and the enemy, his works versus the devil's works. It is all the difference. It's righteousness versus wickedness. No sin versus sin. Light versus darkness. Good fish versus bad fish. Foolish virgins versus wise virgins. Moreover, the law entered that it might abound. But where sin abounded, grace abounded much more, so that as sin reigned in death, even so grace might reign through righteousness to age-abiding life through Yehoshua Messiah, our Master. Through righteousness. What righteousness? The Father's righteousness working in someone. Therefore, someone can be called righteous through believing and seeing that, because we're not calling a believer righteous out of the wicked way, out of the unbeliever's way, out of self-righteousness and pride, but calling it out of the truth. They look the same for an image. Someone says, these are the righteous, like we read. They're called righteous, but it's knowing what it means and believing the truth and knowing it apart from pride, being said out of the truth, knowing it's the Father's righteousness working in someone, a believer, and therefore they can be called righteous without sin, or they can be called righteous with all sin, self-righteousness. Someone says, you're a good person, you're righteous, but they're speaking out of the deceitful, prideful, self-righteous heart. But the image looks the same, because in both things, someone says that person's righteous, and one doing it is doing evil and the other is doing good by saying the same words. Who can see the difference between good and evil? Adam and Eve can't. That's what Genesis is teaching. Father's teaching through his word. They can't see the difference between good and evil. All of it. How much of good and evil? No partiality. All of it. To see no difference between all of it. You can't see for real something. You can't see for real everything else. It's all one. It's all or nothing. If you can see a little bit of the truth, you can discern a little bit of everything. Needing to grow, though. Can't discern or see the difference between a little bit of good and evil. It means someone can't see the difference between a lot and big, because those are bigger things. It requires more understanding and power than the little things. If the little's not being done, the big is not being done. It's already over. It means that it's not being done for real. Someone's breaking the smallest things constantly. They're not keeping anything bigger than that, ever, at any time. Can't. True for all, without partiality. If something's being broken small all the time, they're not keeping anything bigger. They're not doing any good, zero. But man's heart is backwards already. He believes that he can do big things while not doing the small things and skipping the small things or not being able to, but he can do the big things. That's what the heart believes. Adam's heart and Eve's heart believes the exact opposite in the heart, that they can do big things, huge things, and just throw the small away and not be able to do the small things. No one can. They're lying. They're not doing those big things. They're just selling a lie that they are keeping big things. In reality, people are straining out gnats, swallowing camels. They swallow the big things whole as if it doesn't exist. It goes right through their ears, through their head, through their heart, and disappears like lightning. Something big, something good, doing good, righteous works, mercy, forgiveness, all these good things, swallows a camel. It's like doesn't even notice, it's just gulp. But when there's a tiny little gnat, some carnal, tiny little thing, it makes it into a monstrous thing everywhere. Businesses are doing it. Religions are doing it. Commercials are doing it. Through the selling of products, they're doing it. It's everywhere, this work in the heart. It can be seen for real. If the Father is giving someone to see, it can be seen in all kinds of things. Once it's seen, something in the heart, a law, an understanding of a law that the Father writes in the heart, once something is truly given, now he can start showing someone how it's everywhere and that it's working through many different carnal things. The same spiritual thing is working through anything and everything. Someone has to be completely blind to see none of it, to see that this is not what man does, that he strains out gnats and blows up tiny things into monstrous things. And when the big thing comes by, it dumps it like dung on a dunghill. It doesn't even recognize it as existing. It's just gone. It's wicked. It's worthless. Someone that cares about that is wicked to this world. Someone that cares about something real, big, good, they're considered wicked, trash, because the big things are the most worthless things to Adam and Eve. The biggest things are the biggest abomination and worthless things to man's heart, and the smallest worthless nothings are, in reality, are the biggest things to Adam's heart. It's incredible. The works to prove this are everywhere, cannot be hidden. If someone has eyes to see, they can start seeing it for real, that this is no lie. It's everywhere. People are doing it everywhere, constantly. Believers were also guilty of doing the same. Now, it has to be overcome under his favor. He doesn't condemn us for not being what we need to be in any given law to keep, to walk in the Spirit and keep the spiritual law. He doesn't condemn us for not being what we need to be in any one thing in one day. He's not requiring believers to do it of themselves. We're supposed to deny self because we can't do it. It's what 1,500 years of Israel is for. 1,500 years of the Old Covenant through Moses, through the people, through all the examples. One big thing that it's constantly proving and teaching of natural Jerusalem under the Old Covenant is that man can't do any good of himself. That's what it's constantly huge in everyone's face teaching, but people can't see it because they don't want to see it. They're not asking, they don't want the truth, but running from the Creator and his truth. They're not seeing it because they're blind, but they also don't want to see it. When it comes their way, then they turn a blind eye to something. Someone acts like they want truth and good, but then when the test comes to prove whether their words are true, they fail the test and act like that test never happened. That test just proved that someone didn't do it. And the wicked are also tested all day long. The most rich people, powerful people in the world, worldly power, they get tested, and they get big tests that come. Someone might say, oh, heavy is the crown, so righteous. No, because their sin is so big, the test is big. Sometimes the test is so big, it's dealing with literal life lost. It'll test just how wicked that king's heart is, that he's ready to have a nephew or some person killed over some money. That's right. There is no way out for King God man because he's trapped. Everything he chooses will be wickedness, either way, apart from the Creator. A bigger test doesn't mean it's not true for all people. This applies just the same in any test, small or big. Doesn't make someone better or worse, whether it's a smaller or bigger test. It's proving the same sin and corruption. Someone will take money that they have so much of because they're tested to see whether they don't love money and aren't doing it for money. The wicked are being tested all the time. No one's talking about it in this world. No one's seeing it except true believers. And it's not being spoken or advertised because that's an abomination to the enemy. He's trying to suppress all truth and unrighteousness. They're not going to teach that in school or CNN, that the wicked are being tested and that they constantly fail every day, that they never pass their tests that the Father gives. Every word someone says, it's going to be tested whether it's true or not right now. No one can say, I'm not partial, I don't love money, without any testing. Without a test, there's nothing proving anything yet. There has to be some pressure, testing. That's what proves whether those words are true, not zero testing, not singing in the church world on a bench with no testing in the moment of any given sin, but then out in the world, as soon as there's some pressure, instantly sinning and doing evil. And then that test is just blindly ignored as if it never happened over and over again. The plagues don't even exist to Pharaoh. He's so blind. What plagues? Bring it on again. There's no plagues. I'm Pharaoh. I'm God. Can't people see that's the heart of sin, is to be Elohim in its own mind, a God in its own heart? That is the blasphemy and man of sin and pride and the beast and the false prophet. To be sons of the devil is to be the devil, is to be the old man beast in sin, opposing the Creator and exalting himself above all that are called gods, Elohims, the Elohim of Elohims, God of gods, sitting in the temple on his throne room where he ought not to sit, replacing the Creator in his heart with himself as being the Creator in his heart. Not about saying cheap words and creating an image of this, but the reality is happening in the heart. Pride is in the heart. Being a God in one's own mind is in the heart. That's the understanding, and that's what has to be given, or else it can't be seen. And someone will just say, no, I'm not, if it's never seen. They'll just say they're not doing it. But their works prove that that's what they do all day long. Proves that it's a God in its own heart, needing to control people, carnally control and command, always putting heavy weights and yokes and burdens onto people, causing unrest, disturbing, sin, doubting, fear, always late, never out of debt, always behind and in debt in all kinds of ways, never good enough. There's never any contentment at all, zero, in the devil's way, in the wide gate way. This is what people do to others. They destroy them because they're destroyed. And they don't acknowledge their sin and that their heart is wicked and desperately deceitful above all things. Believers acknowledge and know that their heart is desperately wicked and deceitful. And a believer that hasn't believed for very long, they just have a small amount of that truth, but it's there. But later it grows, and now that truth is more complete, it's bigger, still true. The same words are still true, but there is growth. In unbelief, there is zero, there is nothingness. It's still full-blown corrupt and wicked with no sight of anything that's true or good yet. No good works yet from the Father, because the only way to do good works for real is through belief in him and through denial of self and belief through Messiah, to have the Creator, Father also, only through Messiah. both or none. To know the Father is to know Messiah. To know Messiah is to know the Father. To not know Messiah and believe in him, they don't have the Father either. They're lying if they say they know the Father, but deny Messiah openly. It's obvious they don't have him. But their lie will claim that they believe in God, in the Creator, and they don't. No one who denies the true Messiah knows the Creator. That's the only way the Father made to know him, is through Messiah. All things were created by the Creator through Messiah, for Messiah, for all things to go through, all creation to go through Messiah. How does he show that in Genesis? He teaches the end from the beginning. The sword is the Father's word. Messiah is the word because he lived the Father's word, but we're supposed to be the Father's word also, just the same as Messiah. But the teaching's right there. No one can have life. No one can get to the tree of life unless they go through that spinning sword, which is the word, which is the Father's word, which is through Messiah also teaching. Long before it happened, long before Messiah was born, the Father was already teaching, but they could not see. They cannot see what it means and what it is in the heart at all without him. So then that sword is also representing Messiah. It requires death, slashing of the sword to have life. It's going to have to cut up sin and be the Creator's way, which is under his favor, working over time to overcome sin and do good, which is under his favor over time, giving us his favor and grace to be corrected, to learn, to repent constantly for any sin and grow and do the good thing. It's got to go through the sword to get to the tree of life, can't bypass it. And that sword's going to cut up and divide and slash and destroy the wickedness in a believer. Then he allows someone to have life only through his way, through that way, through Messiah. And what Messiah died so that his people die with him, has to go through that death by the sword in order to live with him and have the tree of life and get to the tree, the other side of the sword, to get to the Father, the tree of life. And what are the works of the Father? What are the fruits on the trees? They're the works. You will know them by their fruit. Fruits, their works. What are their fruits for? Healing. Healing for the nations. The Father's works are for healing. It's for the good of people and never the bad. A believer's heart needs to become continually for the good of people, for real, with no other crooked intention. Even if someone doesn't believe, it was still for the good of them. It has to be for an enemy, for the good of them. Even if they don't believe, it has to be for the good, the healing of the nations. And this prophecy is going to continue to work until it's finished. But the work has already begun, and it's already becoming true for those who believe. It's true now, it's true to come. It's all one. It applies now, and it can be seen how it's applying now and how it's applying to come. If it's being given, someone asking to see how his word applies now, all of it. Not to come only or just now, but both now and to come. There's no division in the Creator like this. He's one. His name is one. He is one. Alone. No other. Elohim. He's Elohim alone. The only true Elohim, as Messiah taught. The only true. Only means only. Church world. True means true here. It's not a trick. It's not even a parable here. He is the only true Elohim. Therefore, Messiah being Elohim would make him false. If he was, Messiah just called himself false. That's not what he did. But that's just trying to bring out the corruption of the lie that the church world teaches. To try to bring it out. Messiah did not believe, does not believe that there is more than one creator or that he is Elohim, God himself. No, he did not. That is the sin and rebellion and blasphemy. That is the works of the devil, the rebellion, the wide gateway, free will, doing things yourself, determining self, doing everything of self, self-righteous, self-works, creating laws to make self-righteous, and then do the laws you create so that you're righteous. How easy is that? It's as easy as a river flowing back into the ocean, nothing stopping it without restrictions. It's how easy it is to do that sin. Create a law real quick that makes self-righteous. If there's a problem and someone got caught in sin, just create the law right in that moment, recreate it so that it makes you not a sinner, so that it bypasses it and justifies self so as not to be a sinner, determining it. If such and such means this person or that person did some kind of sin, change the terms, change the law, change the definition of things in order to make self not a sinner with all things. Does this in the heart constantly. That's what man's heart's doing. Justifying, creating loopholes, all so that he's not a sinner. He determines that himself, which is the pride. It's a serious pride to do this. Man's not the creator. He didn't create anything. Not even the enemy is a creator or created anything. Only the Father is. Only the true creator is. The enemy wants to be, through pride, replacing and being the Elohim, the creator. So also all the sons of the devil want to have this and is having this in the heart, replacing the creator in their heart, being the God-man Almighty. Not good. That's why we read in Romans 6 after all this in Romans 5. What is it? Why do we read what we read in Romans 6? Because of what it sounds like and because of what the apostle knew people would say it means. What shall we say then? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? Is that how it's working? No, it's not. But that's what people make it to be with their heart. That's what they say it means in their heart. It's what they're doing with works. Grace is here now. I could sin all I want. Messiah came so that we don't have to die and live in him and keep the commandments and learn them and walk as Messiah walked. He did this so we don't have to. He destroyed the law. He destroyed everything good. Now there's no definition to righteousness either without the law. And there's no definition or meaning to lawlessness without the Father's law. But because it doesn't understand, then it's going to judge his word and condemn it and say that it's some wicked thing that it's teaching and that his word is foolish and evil when it's their own teaching and their foolishness put onto his word, put onto the golden calf, and then saying God does it, blaming the golden calf, but man created the golden calf. He puts his doctrine on the golden calf so that it's a scapegoat, so that it could say, God has done this. It's God's teaching, not mine. So that it can sound like a believer saying it's God's teaching and not my own. But the reason why someone's saying that is out of all evil and nothing to do with why a believer says those words at all. Same words. So that it can masquerade like it's Father the devil and say the same words that a believer might say and says. And it has nothing to do with the meaning for why a believer says it. That it's Elohim's works, Elohim's teachings, not mine, saying that out of trying to escape any kind of trouble or thinking it can escape the judgment and condemnation, trying to escape to save its image so that it doesn't look bad, so that it doesn't look like it doesn't know, so that it doesn't look like a sinner. That's why someone says it out of a corrupt heart. God is this. I wouldn't torture anyone in hell. But it's God, the Bible says this. God says it. I wouldn't do that. Someone is saying that out of a full-blown evil, corrupt heart. They're not saying those words out of truth and understanding. It's out of corruption and evil. It's to separate itself from having anything to do with any kind of consequence for being connected to something, so that they think to preserve their image, so that their image isn't trashed, so that they don't look bad. So then they builds a golden calf and tries to blame all of its sins on it. That's what people do when they go into crazy sin. It just manifests even stronger. They create another person and become that person and act on purpose and can't come out of this act. That's what the delusion and judgment is. Not that they caught a cold, but it got there for a reason, and it got worse and worse until someone got there. They didn't just catch a cold all of a sudden, start killing a bunch of people, and then make up some false character to blame all its sin on, and then switch like a light switch and masquerade and morph into the character it needs to, so that it can blame all its sins on something that doesn't exist. The golden calf that it created is what Christianity's doing with the heart. It's doing this no different than what a serial killer would do, to try to stay out of prison, to try to escape the court by acting insane and like this other person, and then blaming it on it, then saying, I can't remember, I don't remember what I did, I don't know, I don't know. And people actually believe this lie. Let it be known that anyone that wasn't born slow or something, that all of them know somewhere in their heart, and they're doing it on purpose. It's not some disease they caught. It's just they can't get out of it. They have to do that because they're trapped and they're falling. And they have to masquerade and do their wicked delusion to try to stay out of getting trouble, but they're already in trouble, already caught, it's already over, but it doesn't think so. It's doing all that because it is caught and in slavery. All the way to the death, someone doesn't believe they were in a delusion under slavery and caught utterly, all the way to death. Someone completes the delusion. Some man, some woman out at the battlefield saying, leave me behind, because it's living the delusion. And someone goes, what did you say? I'm strong. I'm not afraid. What did you say? Now it has to put on the act to prove that it's strong. All an act while it's shaking inside in misery, so cowardly fearful. But the reason it can pull off insane things to make it kind of look like it's not scared is because it's in such death and delusion. It's so blind that the blinding is acting like strength, but it's actually stupidity and foolishness and blinding, making it look like someone's strong. It's not actual strength apart from the Creator. They are trembling inside for the fear of death in all cowardness. That is who Adam and Eve is first. Everyone is that first, but it's lying under crazy situation, getting shot at, being threatened by some enemy shooting, and some crazy person is fighting with their own supposedly side, says, I won't let you have this weapon, I won't let you have it, because it needs to be God, woman, God, man in control. It's insane. And it died in a delusion. That's the truth. It masqueraded to the death. And then they give these kind of people medals and honor, trophies, even to the dead that cannot see or know because they fell asleep and are dead right now. They can't even see any of that. A man doesn't even know what his things will go to in the future. His possessions, we read, a man cannot know. So people acting like they know what's going to happen tomorrow and next week and next month are in rebellion. There's no reality. They're in a delusion. They don't know for real, but they believe and act like they know, and they try to do things to prove that they know. And just because the Father allows so many things to happen to make it look like their plan is working, that's just because the Father allowed it and did it, so that they can believe their lie even further, that they're God and have free will and are a God Almighty, determining everything of itself. But all the times it fails the test constantly and contradicts that, doesn't count for anything. Nope. When God-man has no control, literally even, and does not want to do something but has to do it anyways with no power to do otherwise, that somehow doesn't prove that they're God. Somehow that doesn't prove that they're not God. Just partially blind and just removes it and pretends it doesn't exist, when they actually prove that they're no God and could not do what they wanted at all. Why does someone range when they're caught and put in chains and handcuffed? Because they cannot believe God-man is getting caught. They cannot believe that it's not able to do what it wants, utterly. That's why someone rages, because a beast got caught and it cannot believe it got caught. It cannot believe it's in a cage and can do nothing about it. That's who mankind is spiritually, in a cage, a spiritual cage, and can do nothing about it of self. No power to come out of it. Judgment is strong, and man has no power over the Creator at all. Zero. They are a slave to their sins, mankind, Adam and Eve. Slave, meaning can't come out of it. Slave to the sin, and a slave driver for sin, working for sin. It's in front of them, and it commands, and it marches like a troop to the sin, following the command to sin like a troop, marching, obeying the lusts of sin. While it thinks it has free will, it's a slave to sin and can't stop, somehow thinking it's free while it's in slavery and in a cage. Incredible, because the definition of cage is not man's definition. What the Father's word means for cage has nothing to do with a literal cage only. And being outside of a literal cage, therefore, does not prove that they're not in a cage, because that's not the meaning anyways, literal cage. But the church world and harlot is a cage for every foul spirit and hated bird. And it traps people, because the false prophet does that work, deceiving people, and it becomes a cage to trap the carnal, the beast, the unbelievers. And there's all kinds of cages, all kinds of denominations, peoples, beliefs, trapping in all kinds of different ways. The Father traps the beasts, just like a literal beast gets trapped. If it were to acknowledge that it's a sinner and wicked and in slavery with no power and evil, he would start taking you out of the cage for real, would do the actual real thing and come out of the cage. But no, people don't want to acknowledge. Adam doesn't want to acknowledge that he's a sinner, no good. Therefore, he will remain in a cage while believing he's out of it. Needing to believe the lie is the delusion. Delusion is believing something that isn't so and not true at all, but believing the opposite, that it's not so when it is. That's a delusion. Believing a lie is true when it's not is delusion. Believing that someone's reality is something that it's not is a delusion. Certainly not, certainly not. How shall we who died to sin live any longer in it? Or do you not know that as many of us were baptized into Messiah, Yehoshua, were baptized into his death? Therefore we were buried with him through baptism into death. What is it not saying in there? Are they at least seeing what it doesn't mean? You know, not knowing what it means, at least see what it doesn't mean. How do you get baptized into death, literally? How do you get buried, literally, while still being alive? How is the apostle doing that? How is that working in him while he's alive? To be buried, can't people see what it's not and what it doesn't mean, at least? It's not carnal. It's not the literal thing here. It's not meaning that. Therefore, the baptism is not that either, because the buried is not that, and the baptism is therefore not that. Not the understanding, but nevertheless, the words are true, and someone is baptized with the Spirit and fire, with the set apart Holy Spirit and fire. Messiah baptizes into his death. That's the only answer, to die to self and sin and to the law of sin and death, meeting the righteous requirement, which is death for sin, for breaking the law, so that someone can be freed from sin because of the inability to keep the law at any time and be in death because of it. Because the old man is death. It cannot keep anything, cannot do any good. So now there's a way through belief to die in Messiah, to the old man, to the law of sin and death, to the inability to keep it because the flesh is weak and just cannot do it. To die to Adam and now be given power from the Creator for the new man, his spirit in us, to be able to keep his will now, to keep his law, so that we can keep it, is why. Not Messiah dying so that we have nothing to do with it, so therefore now we don't have to keep it. He died so that we have to keep it. That's why. Exact opposite of what they say. 180. Flip it around. Literally what it means. He died so that we can die with him and live with him, which means to keep the Creator's commandments, to keep his laws in our heart, so that we can do it for the first time, unlike any time before belief. Nobody ever did it before belief or before Messiah. Not even one was righteous. No, not one. All are sinners. All have gone astray. All are like lost sheep. No shepherd. Can't find one. The Father is saying, I see no one. There is no shepherd. So that was through that whole time, no one. But now there is a way through Messiah, the true shepherd. And the Father did the works. I will do it now. I will raise up my right hand and do it myself, since no one can do it. That's what we read in Isaiah somewhere, I believe, in there. The Creator even saying, basically, just that. I will do it now, since there's nobody. Astonishment, a wonder. Where is it? There's not even one. I will do it now. It's his works, he's saying. He will do it. The works in us. Man can't do it. So if someone wants death, keep being self-righteous and trying and believing that self is good and not a sinner and all these things. If someone wants death, then do that. Do what man has always done from his youth. If someone wants death, follow your heart if you want death. Trust in self if you want death. Trust the deceitful heart that's desperately wicked if someone wants death, because it will only do the works of death by breaking his commandments constantly. Therefore, we were buried with him through baptism into death, that just as Messiah was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in newness of life. It's giving the understanding, the spiritual understanding of dying and walking, coming into life just as Messiah was resurrected. But this is meaning something for us within, spiritually, for our heart. Even his literal resurrection is meaning something valuable, heavenly, spiritual, to live right now. Something like dying and then coming back to life and walking in newness of life. If we have been united together in the likeness of his death, certainly we also shall be of his resurrection, in the likeness of his resurrection. Knowing this, that our old man was crucified with him, that the body of sin might be done away with, because it was no good. That we should no longer be slaves of sin, because of who Adam is and his inability to do any good and keep the Father's commands. It's slavery to sin through breaking the law constantly. For he who has died has been freed from sin. And this is going to sound like, because it has to be said in words, and it's going to sound like something it's not, because there's no other way to say it so often, or the only way to say it is to sound contradicting with his truth. It's constantly like that. It's not to be taken carnally and literally freed from sin as if it's like, boom, one day complete. It's not the meaning that it's done in one day. This is the teaching of the truth, the process and the end of it, and what it will be, all is one. This is the teaching of it, speaking carnally like this for the purpose of understanding. He who has died has been freed from sin. This is for a believer to learn and know. It's not that it's not meaning it's done in one day, even though it can sound like it. Now, if we died with Messiah, we believe that we shall also live with him, knowing that Messiah, having been raised from the dead, dies no more. Didn't Messiah say that anyone who believes in him will never die? Death no longer has dominion, power over him. For the death that he died to sin once for all. For all. That's what it means, for all, not some. but the life that he lives to Elohim. Likewise, you also reckon yourselves to be dead indeed to sin, but alive to Elohim in Messiah, Yehoshua our Master. Do not let sin reign in your mortal body, that you should obey it in its lust. Do not present your members as instruments of unrighteousness to sin, but present yourselves to Elohim as being alive from the dead, and your members as instruments of righteousness to Elohim. For sin shall not have dominion over you, for you are not under law, but under grace. Not under the old covenant of trusting self, keeping the law ourself, trying ourself, under self-righteousness. And that's the meaning, some meaning of what under law means. What then, shall we sin because we are not under law but under grace? Certainly not. It doesn't mean that. What a narrow way his way is. Do you not know that to whom you present yourselves slaves to obey, you are that one's slaves whom you obey, whether to sin, to death, or of obedience to righteousness? But Elohim be thanked that, though you were slaves of sin, all believers were slaves of sin, that you were, yet you obeyed from the heart that form of doctrine to which you were delivered, and having been set free from sin, you became slaves of righteousness. I speak in human terms because of the weakness of your flesh, for just as you presented your members as slaves of uncleanness and of lawlessness, leading to more lawlessness, so now present your members as slaves of righteousness for holiness. When you were slaves of sin, you were free in regard to righteousness. That's the enemy's way. Free from all good. That's the devil's definition and masquerade and image of freedom. It will proclaim freedom to you. It will create the image that looks like the true by proclaiming freedom, but it's actually free from righteousness and only doing evil. Freed from righteousness is wickedness. It's slavery in reality, but they proclaim freedom. The carnal man proclaims freedom, and the religion proclaims the freedom. It's freedom from righteousness that they're proclaiming for real. Not going to say the words. They don't want to be caught thinking no one can see. They want to be spotted as of the enemy of the devil, a snake and hypocrite, a sinner. What fruit did you have then in the things of which you are now ashamed? For the end of those things is death. But now, having been set free from sin and having become slaves of Elohim, you have your fruit to holiness, and the end, age-abiding life. For the wages of sin is death, the two things. But the gift of Elohim is age-abiding life in Messiah, Yehoshua our Master. Who believes our report? We read, who believes our report? Therefore, anyone in unbelief is bound under the law. They're bound to it. The only escape and way out of this condemnation and death is death itself. More example in Romans 7. The law has dominion over a man as long as he lives. The woman who has a husband is bound by the law to her husband as long as she lives. This is living in the beast, living alive in Adam when he needs to die. But as long as someone lives, they're bound by the law. But an example of a husband being bound by the law to her husband as long as he lives. But if the husband dies, he's giving an example, a different angle of everything we read in Romans 6 towards the end there, or all of it. It's all connected. But a woman has a husband and is bound by the law to her husband as long as he lives. But if the husband dies, she is released from the law of her husband. So then if while her husband lives, she marries another man, she will be called an adulteress. But if her husband dies, she is free from that law, so that she is no adulteress, though she marries another man. What do we read also from the apostle? To be married to another, that is Messiah. So there's a spiritual fornication, to be married with death, and those that are not of Messiah, that are alive in Adam, committing spiritual adultery and fornication constantly, every day in unbelief, committing this fornication. If she gets married to another man while the husband's alive, it's adultery. But if the one dies, it's not adultery. Therefore, my brethren, you also have become dead to the law through the body of Messiah, that you may be married to another. There it is. To him who was raised from the dead, that we should bear fruit to Elohim. For when we were in the flesh, the sinful passions which were aroused by the law were at work in our members to bear fruit to death. What did the law do? What did it work and act like it does? It worked. It did this thing. It's not that the literal law had some kind of power all by itself and did this, and now you like blame the law or some nonsense. But this is what it was. This is what it's working to this day in unbelief still, and what it did since the beginning. The law aroused sinful passions which were aroused by the law. Someone hears a command and they want to sin. They're aroused by it. Talk about sin to someone and not doing some kind of sin, and they get aroused to do it, wanting to do it, wanting to break it. That's how corrupt man is. It's hopeless in Adam. It's hopeless. It's a literal slave to sin, and restraining self and trying to restrain self is not righteous and will bring no life to someone as they try to force themselves not to sin or something carnally. That's not righteous. That's the heart sinning and wanting to sin, but trying to literally restrain self is slavery. And it's a nasty war that someone will never win within themselves. But it's really not the true war, because it's giving in to sin constantly. But it's like an evil war. The heart isn't changing, but someone's trying to make it look like it is keeping some kind of law, but the heart has no change and doesn't want to do it, doesn't understand it, doesn't live it for real. But someone's trying to outwardly force themselves to keep some law. Only the Creator can change the heart through his way, through belief. Then it will be real. Then it will be true and not fake, wicked, and hypocrisy. But now we have been delivered from the law, having died to what we were held by, so that we should serve in the newness of the Spirit and not in the oldness of the letter. So the connection of all of this is also connected to the oldness of the letter, the carnality of man, and the carnality of how man understands his word, the letters, in contrast to the Spirit, and not the newness of the Spirit, not in the oldness of the letter. So what does that sound like? Sounds kind of bad. Sounds like maybe what he's trashing the Father's word. Here we go again. What shall we say then? Is the law sin? Certainly not. But he knows it sounds like it. Sounds like the law is this real evil thing now because of being a slave to it, causing death, condemnation, arousing people's sins to break it, arousing the flesh to break it and sin. So what? Is the law sin? Certainly not. What a narrow way. On the contrary, I would not have known sin except through the law, for I would not have known covetousness. This is real. That means no one would ever know. It's not some joke or doctrine for religion to say empty words. It's real. No one would know, for I would not have known covetousness unless the law had said, you shall not covet. It's working so many perfect things all at once, what the Father's doing with everything. but sin taking opportunity by the commandment produced in me desire. It's an evil desire, all manner of evil desire. Shows those words are added though, and I guess just desire, but we know the added words here is the meaning in this case. Produced in me all manner of evil desire, for apart from the law, sin was dead. I was alive once without the law, but when the commandment came, sin revived and I died. What on earth is this? How can someone say this isn't foolish that has no understanding? It's going to be foolishness to them, but they don't want to acknowledge it in the church world, that they don't know what it means, don't live by it, hates the truth. What is this? This is something to be embarrassed and ashamed of for how dumb it sounds. That's why the apostle says, I'm not ashamed of Messiah or the gospel, because that's what the world will think and believe of believers, that they're stupid fools and that the Father's word is stupid and foolish. But he's ashamed of everyone who's ashamed of him. Denies those that deny him. Ashamed of those ashamed of him. So it's going to put a pressure of people thinking a believer is stupid, foolish, shameful. It's going to put a pressure to do his word, to keep it, to speak the truth, and not care that the world thinks you're a fool and that this is shameful, stupid, foolish, because they don't have any understanding. That's why it's so. I was alive once without the law, but when the commandment came, sin revived and I died. And the commandment, which was to bring life, I found to bring death. For sin, taking occasion by the commandment, deceived me, and by it killed me. Therefore the law is holy. What on earth? And the commandment holy and just and good. How could he do that now and call it holy after all of this? The commandment to bring life I found to bring death. For sin, taking occasion by the commandment, deceived me, and it killed me. Therefore the law is holy, set apart. Yes, it is, and the commandment set apart and just and good. Seek the understanding for all things, and it will be given for those that believe and ask and believe that he can give. Has then what is good become death to me? Certainly not. He just said so, though, so it sounds. The commandment which was to bring life, I found to bring death. Has then what is good become death to me? What a great tribulation it is, his way. A special tribulation for believers to constantly be like this, something like this constantly with people, sounding like a fool, knowing what they speak of and seeing whatever the Father's given them, but aware that others won't see and understand, and wanting them to, but not seeing it in the many at all. Wanting it and not seeing it, and then seeing that it's going to be believed as foolish and wicked, and knowing this about what other people can only believe over and over and accuse over and over. Yeah, that's a tribulation to do the Creator's will on the narrow way. It's a tribulation just for this reason alone, not let alone everything else. Has then what is good become death to me? Certainly not. But sin, that it might appear sin, was producing death in me through what is good. So that sin through, my goodness, how is anyone going to understand this unless it's given? So that sin through the commandment might become exceedingly sinful. For we know that the law is spiritual. Well, not very many know that though, but believers know. Is that the we? Or is he saying we as in unbelievers know also? No. No, the we here is believers. They learn and know this. Unbelievers don't know what spiritual means and that the law is spiritual. It doesn't even exist. It's in lawlessness still. In their heart it doesn't exist, for we know that the law is spiritual, but I am carnal, sold under sin. For what I am doing I do not understand. For what I will to do, that I do not practice, but what I hate, that I do. If then I do what I will not to do, I agree with the law that it is good, but now it is no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells in me. For I know that in me, that is in my flesh, nothing good dwells. It's not talking about literal blood and literal flesh. Not the understanding here. For to will is present with me, but how to perform what is good I do not find. How true is that? How deadly accurate and true, or full of life accurate, I guess. Not I guess. For the good that I will to do I do not do, but the evil I will not to do, that I practice. How shameful and embarrassing for the image who can hear these words. The apostle sounds like a sinner, because he is. He's acknowledging he's a sinner, and that there's a way to have life and overcome sin. He's acknowledging who and what he is of himself, the carnal man, as every believer is needing and doing and acknowledging. Only believers know that they're sinners, not unbelievers. They don't know that they're sinners yet. They don't believe it in their heart. Now, if I do what I will not to do, it is no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells in me. Is that an excuse? No, he's not saying that out of excusing himself and blaming some non-existent thing or something like that. Once again, the understanding has to be given, because what it sounds like is not what it means, and comes up to someone's carnal mind right away is not what it means at all. There's an understanding under his favor that we can't go any faster than the Father determines. And it's a struggle because of this truth, because we're agreeing with his truth that we're no good, that the carnal man is wicked and only does evil and can't perform the good, but it's under his way, which takes a lot of patience and tribulation and just a steady, slow growth. Therefore, it's hard because you want to see more, but it doesn't just come like that. It has to be through time, through patience, through here a little, there a little. So the apostle's not blaming something and excusing himself by saying it's not I who do it, but sin that dwells in me. There's a truth to this. The old man is dying in Messiah. The Father covers us, which is the forgiveness of sin, under his favor and under his way. It really is the sin that dwells in a believer that's doing it. And the Father's not imputing this sin as condemnation, because this is his way. This is the only way. His way is growth through time, learning his commandments to keep them constantly better and more better and better, and dying to the old man more and more. That is the way. His way is not one day. It's not that. That's sin. That's evil. It's not that. He's not requiring us, the old man, to do it. Nevertheless, we have to do it. Well, that sounds contradicting. We read in Revelation, so that they may rest from their labors, and their works do follow them. What? Rest from your works, your labors, and your works. So cease to do works, and your works follow, because the first one is our own works, resting from our own wicked labors. And the works, the Father's works, do follow them. Two different things. So then when they're two different things, it's not a contradiction. It's only a contradiction with the letters. And it is a contradiction with the letters. But Christianity says there's no contradictions with the letters. That's what they mean by no contradictions. Yes, they do. They won't tell anyone that. No, if someone were to say that, they slipped up and accidentally told the truth. I find then a law, that evil is present with me, the one who wills to do good. Spirit is willing in a believer to do good always. What's the law? I find evil present with me. What a difficult way. And it'll always be that way to the end. Maybe someone is thinking, is it going to be different or something? Is it going to get like better in a way that you kind of want to understand or think it's going to? No, it's going to be constantly like the same way. Constant pressure, constant testing, constant growing, constant watching and praying constantly. It's not going to get better in that way like someone would think or want corruptly. But that's not evil. I'm not saying that because that's evil. It's just that the lie is a lie. It's not so. It's not like the natural man wanted or thought it would be or anything what he thought of himself first. His way is unknown. Someone not living it doesn't know. Those living his way are finding out every day what his way is. Nobody that doesn't live it knows what it is. They don't know what it is. How could they know the end of what they haven't even begun? Believers are learning along the way what it is. We're finding out what we don't know. And then whatever we find out, we need to find out what we don't know further still and keep going. For I delight in the law of Elohim according to the inward man, but I see another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind and bringing me into captivity of the law of sin and death which is in my members. O wretched man that I am. Oh yes, a believer will be saying these words with truth, with understanding. It's just a matter of time. Yes, they will say, "O wretched man I am," or woman, and they'll start seeing and knowing what it means. The carnal man has no clue what this means and isn't living this, "O wretched man I am." No, they're not. It's not possible. Just an image, just something false, carnal, replacement for truth. Not what this really is. And his truth and everything that's from him is good, is special. It is set apart. It's not happening to the whole world. Just the few that believe. O wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death? I thank Elohim through Yehoshua Messiah, our Master. That's who? Father and Messiah in us. So then with the mind I myself serve the law of Elohim, but with the flesh the law of sin. That's all the flesh can do. That's why Adam needs to die. That's why the Father covers, forgives, putting to death the old man, because that's all it ever can do is serve the law of sin. It always will do that, even in a believer, until Adam fully dies in us. It doesn't change that that's true. It's true for a believer too. Adam, who and what we are, never have learned, will never have done any good of ourself. That's true all the way to the end. It's true for believers that Adam, the old man that is us first, will never do any good and always serve the law of sin with the flesh. Always will do that. But overcoming is to overcome the works of the devil through being given by the Father to overcome and do good, while the old is dying and being cut off until he's dead fully at the end, cut off perfectly. That's the way. As Adam, the old man in everyone, is getting cut off in a believer, he is always serving the law of sin with the flesh till all the way to the end. But he's being destroyed in believers, and that's why what we read, the victory, overcoming the sin through it, Adam being destroyed in us, through us being destroyed, the old man, who and what we were first, being destroyed bit by bit. It's overcoming the sin and doing good then instead. That Adam never could do and never will do, ever. Never did, never will. Frightening. There is no righteousness in Adam and Eve. Never was, never will be. Could say that even for believers. Never was, never will be. That is who and what everyone is. They will never be righteous of self. Never was, never will be. Always will be true. All the way to the end for Adam. Never was, never will be. It's the Father's righteousness. There is therefore now no condemnation to those who are in Messiah, Yehoshua, who do not walk according to the flesh, because of everything else we read, putting this to death and the deeds of the flesh to death, but according to the Spirit. For the law of the Spirit of life in Messiah, Yehoshua, has made me free from the law of sin and death. The law. For what the law could not do, in that it was weak through the flesh. It's man connected to the law, man, his works, flesh. The inability to keep anything good, to keep the law in the heart. It's the weakness of man that makes the law sound like it's death. But the law itself is not death or wicked. It just sounds like it through man not being able to keep the law. So there's a connection with man and the law. There's a connection with the law being death because of man not being able to keep it, producing death, which causes it to sound like the law doesn't exist or that it's evil. And that's why we keep reading. Is it this? Certainly not. Is it this? Certainly not. Is it this? Certainly not. For what the law could not do, in that it was weak through the flesh, Elohim did by sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh on account of sin. He condemned sin, putting it to death in the flesh, reversing death and condemnation by dying to it, that the righteous requirement of the law, that death, might be fulfilled in us who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. For those who live according to the flesh set their minds on things of the flesh. Do they ever have their mind on the Father's things and heavenly things? Never. But those who live according to the Spirit, the things of the Spirit, the new things that are given for believers. These things are not given to unbelievers. It's just the truth. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace, because the carnal mind is enmity against Elohim. For it is not subject to the law of Elohim, nor indeed can be. So it's utter foolishness to want to be made righteous of self and making up our own laws, or being righteous of self from trying to keep the Creator's laws and to be made to look righteous for it. The carnal mind is not subject to the law, nor indeed can be. It cannot keep the law in the heart, spiritually, in spirit, with the heart at all. Not speaking carnally, keeping the law here, which is only looking like something. To keep adultery carnally, outwardly, is to only look like you don't commit adultery. Real adultery is in the heart, something that has to be seen for what it is, and that's what man cannot do, cannot overcome adultery, real adultery in the heart, because the carnal mind is not subject to the law, the spiritual law of Elohim, nor indeed can be. So what's the answer? Since it's impossible, death through belief in Messiah, and through death, dying to the old man, the only way to live. So then those who are in the flesh cannot please Elohim. But you are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit. If indeed the Spirit of Elohim dwells in you. It's a big if. Now, if anyone does not have the Spirit of Messiah, he is not his. And if Messiah is in you, the body is dead because of sin, but the Spirit is life because of righteousness. But if the Spirit of him who raised Yehoshua from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Messiah from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies through his Spirit who dwells in you. Therefore, brethren, we are debtors, not to the flesh, not the worldly, carnal, wicked, worldly debt in the flesh, carnal, flesh things, to live according to the flesh, not that debt, not to the carnal, wicked, controlling debt that debt's used for, to control people, destroy them through control, get them to do whatever someone commands so that they disobey the Creator, which causes death for sure. Not to the flesh to be debtors, to live according to the flesh. For if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live. For as many as are led by the Spirit of Elohim, these are sons of Elohim. How on earth could the Pharisees say that to say that Messiah is the son of Elohim is to claim to be equal with the Creator and God Almighty? Don't they know in the church world these are sons of Elohim? Same as Messiah, son of Elohim. These are also sons led by the Spirit. So what? All true believers are God, one with the Trinity, equal with God, making self to be equal with God. That was their accusation. Messiah never did that. It's blasphemy what they did. They did that. They did that work in their heart. It's a God in its own mind and heart. It did that itself, dumping its sin and accusing Messiah of doing it for calling himself the Son of Elohim. He exposed their hypocrisy utterly. In the scriptures, you are called gods. Don't you know? Hypocrites, blind, picking and cherry picking partiality constantly and turning a blind eye whenever it feels like to something and pretending it doesn't exist or apply to them in a certain situation, but then later it acts like it applies whenever it needs to make itself look wise and always be right and not a sinner, and make someone else look wicked, trash them, condemn them, make them look like a sinner, expose and want to destroy them through destroying someone's image. It's the only thing that this world cares about is the image. For you did not receive the spirit of bondage again to fear. So what is it that the carnal man is in constantly? Carnal, cowardly fear. And anyone that's in that full-blown fear is in death and has no love, because love casts out this fear. Perfect love casts out fear. Those that are a slave to sin, they are in bondage in fear, not the fear of Elohim, the good fear, the true fear, but the cowardly fear. But you receive the spirit of adoption, by whom we cry out, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit. How do we know? His spirit bears witness with our spirit that we are children of Elohim. That's how believers know. It's not pride. It's because the Spirit bears witness with our spirit that we are children of Elohim. This only applies to believers. Everyone else will be lying. That say they're believers, but they're in continual sin constantly. They will apply this to themselves and lie just like that and say the same thing a believer does. So that by the time a believer says the same words at times as the false, they look just like the corruption and the hypocrisy to other people, at the very least. Don't look any different, even though someone sees a shining light and what is denying it and not acknowledging it, not wanting to believe it. So then it's accused as an evildoer, just like anyone else, continually for doing good. And if children, then heirs, heirs of Elohim and joint heirs with Messiah, if indeed we suffer with him, that we may also be glorified together. Well, that's a big if too, because the believers will suffer with him. Messiah was acquainted with grief, not something the world wants to hear. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. Well, that's on that day, the day of salvation, the finished work, first resurrection. That's what he's speaking of, that glory to be revealed. For the first resurrection in Messiah, they will be gathered together at the end. That's not a promise for those in the second resurrection. That won't happen at that moment on that day for them. Unbelievers need to know that so that they know. Is that what they want? Do they want death now and death to come through not even being alive in the age to come? But there's a resurrection for the just and the unjust. So there's one resurrection and a second. And the first one is the better resurrection, we read. It's coming to life now and to come in the next age. But the dead are dead now, and they'll be dead in the next age. That's what the Father revealed to me. Every other thing that he's added onto this has lined up with that same truth. Keeps adding to it. All his word is flowing together with that truth. Second resurrection is not happening until after the 1,000 years is finished, which would be the beginning of day 8. The beginning of the 1,000 years is the beginning of day 7, the day of rest. And the 6 days is the 6,000 years of man in his unrest and his carnal kingdoms, working his own works and his own pleasures, apart from the Creator's righteousness completely. Messiah died on preparation day, 14th day of the true calendar month. 14th, but then in the morning it would have been the 15th, which would have been a regular Sabbath day, the 7th day. He was dead all day and all night. The death for one full day representing that rest, and rose early in the morning at the beginning of sunrise on the 3rd day. So the 7th day was the only day that he was dead all day and night. Special days, the 7th day, the Sabbath rest, and this completes the Sabbath in Messiah. The Messiah is the master of Sabbath. To believe in him is to die with him and enter rest continually, spiritually, every day. It's to die to the old man, rest from our works, as Messiah did. That his literal death is teaching, a spiritual teaching and reality. It's to be dead on the 7th day to self and not be found. Adam dying, putting Adam to the death and reversing the curse through death. Man 6 carnal, made on day 6, reversing at 9, 69. Devil has some other words for 69, wicked, snake. So 6 is 9 inverted because he reverses the curse. The death to death is life. And then we live. And the next day would have been the 8th day if it continued. The first day of the week would have been the 8th day, continuing the 7th day Sabbath. So the resurrection for the rest of the dead doesn't happen until the 8th day, which is after the 1,000 years, which is the beginning of the 8th day of creation. But believers are resurrected early, the first fruits. Those that believe now or come to life now already, and enter 7, enter his rest from 6 carnal man to 7. And then in the age to come, at the end of this age, it'll be the beginning of day 7. But that's the first resurrection, 1 with 8. It's early. It's 1 with rest, 7, and 8 is 1. So the last great day is on a Sabbath. After the Feast of Tabernacles, the 7th, there's 7 days of the feast. The first day is on the 15th, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So the 15th is the first day of that feast. And then 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Yes, 20. And then 21, the 7th day would be the 21st of the feast. And then the next day is the regular Sabbath, but that's the last great day, which would be the 8th day, continuing after the 7th. And it lands on the 7th day of the week, which is the 8th day, which is 1 with 7. The new creation is 8. Circumcised on the 8th day, cutting off the body of sin, the new man, 8 people saved in Noah's ark, salvation, the judgment, the new creation, the flood, even a type of the new creation. So 8 is the new creation, 7 is becoming spiritual in Messiah's rest, and 6 is the carnal man before belief. So then on the 7th day, the first resurrection happens, and it's 1 day early from the rest of creation, because 8 and 7 is 1 for believers. It's 1,000 years or 1 day early. The second resurrection, the rest of the dead don't come to life until after the 7th day, or 1,000 years, which will be the beginning of the day 8, which is when Messiah rose on the first day of the week. That'll be the last great day for all creation. That's the second resurrection. First resurrection happens 1 day early. First fruits. There is something first about it, spiritually and literally. But the important thing is spiritually to come to life now, early, before the rest of creation comes to life. And we read the rest of the dead were not made to live, to come to life, until the 1,000 years were finished. That's why there's no forgiveness in this age, Messiah said. this wicked age, the 6 days age, or the age to come for those that blaspheme the Spirit, which is to blaspheme the Creator, who is Spirit. Unbelievers blaspheme his Spirit because they blaspheme all the time. Blasphemy is written on the harlot's forehead. Anyone that doesn't believe is blaspheming the Spirit, of which there's no forgiveness in this age or the age to come, which is the day 7, the 1,000 years. No, we don't read forever with a literal word meaning that, but Messiah, teaching the truth, said in this age or the age to come that there's no forgiveness, not the ages after that. The reason why it's not the age to come is because the rest of the dead will not come to life on the 7th day of creation. Only believers will be glorified together on the last day of this age, which is the first day of the 7th day, or 1,000 years. There's no promise in all of Scripture that the wicked will be raised up with believers in the first resurrection, but only the opposite, that they'll be uprooted utterly. Therefore, there can't be forgiveness for someone that's still dead. That's why there's no forgiveness in the age to come that blaspheme the Spirit, because they won't be alive to be forgiven. Who believes this? It's quite the severe reward. It's quite the reward believers have to look forward to. Definitely not worth not doing his will and overcoming. Not worth it, at the very least. Don't believers want to be receiving that reward with all the other true believers that ever lived on that day and be glorified together? Don't they want that? Doesn't somebody want that? And Romans 8 is big, further teaching the salvation of all in due time, through the plan, through the way. But the creation was subjected to futility. For the earnest expectation of the creation eagerly waits for the revealing of the sons of Elohim, because this world never knew them or acknowledged them and never believed them, but persecuted and murdered them the whole entire 6,000 years. The world doesn't know who the believers are in its heart. It's why it's waiting for the revealing of the sons of Elohim. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, not by man's will, but because of him, Creator, who subjected it in hope, because the creation itself also will be delivered from the bondage of corruption, sin and death, the law of sin and death, the bondage of corruption. The creation itself, how much of it, all of it, will be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of Elohim. For we know that the whole creation groans and labors with birth pangs until now. Not only that, but we also, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for the adoption, the redemption of our body. He just made a contrast with all creation versus believers, speaking about all. The redemption of our body. For we were saved in this hope, but hope that is seen is not hope. For why does one still hope for what he sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we eagerly wait for it with perseverance. I think that's going to be it. Maybe get a little bit of sleep. Messiah makes intercession for the saints according to the will of Elohim. And he works all things together. All things work together for the good to those who love Elohim. That's a believer's promise. That's what we're supposed to believe. Is always that the Father can make a way and show us something that seems impossible, or correct, forgive, be healed, make a way. It'll work out for good, but that has to be believed and asked for. We're supposed to believe this, so that he actually does it and not be like everyone else, constantly divided, constantly murdering, constantly division. constant strife, constant wickedness, constant fornication and adultery, constant pride, constant attacks at the smallest things, and then separation forever, murder, betrayal. This is not supposed to be for his people like this at all. It's not. This cannot be for his people, because the Messiah is not divided and his body is one. How could a member of the body say you're worthless and wicked to another member when it's attached to the same body? How foolish and wicked is that? It's not for believers to do the old sinful works of self and wickedness that the whole world is in. It's supposed to be set apart and different from the rest of the world because of the Creator's works, making us different, set apart, doing his good works of light. His yoke is easy and his burden is light. It is a burden to have the Creator's light, but his burden is light. It's not darkness. So the Father's working out a plan and a purpose that he foreknew and predestined to conform to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. They don't believe this either. Not in their heart, not if it's tested. I've never seen it. It despises what we read in Romans 8. The harlot doesn't actually believe it. Can sound like it believes it when there's no light around them. When they have some false thing or nothingness in their mind for what it means, then it can kind of look like it. They believe it. When there's light next to them to test, to show, to expose, to ask, to give the truth, then they rage and do not believe this at all because they're in rebellion. There's no such thing as predestined in the mind of a carnal mind still. It's not subject to the law of Elohim. Pretending to love it, pretending to know what it means, and pretending to believe it. What shall we say of this, all these things? If Elohim is for us, who can be against us? Well, the answer is no one for those that believe. You need to believe this. Who shall bring a charge against Elohim's elect? It is Elohim who justifies, not self, not the believer themselves. So who can bring a charge? Who can actually do that and make it stick and stand in reality? No one. It's a delusion that someone thinks it's making it stick. It's in death for trying. Receives exactly what it sows. It reaps exactly what it sows and comes back to the wicked that do this to his people constantly. They're in death for doing it. They haven't escaped the judgment and won't escape the judgment. And they'll be exposed perfectly in due time for every secret thought and work and intention of the heart that everyone ever did every day of their life. That's needing to be revealed now for believers. The judgment is now, and that has to be revealed now. The light coming into his light is to reveal all that darkness and sin now and to cut it off now and to not hide anymore now, but to acknowledge it now. Who is he who condemns? Well, the carnal man's always condemning, but who's doing it in reality? No one. It is Messiah who died and furthermore is also risen, who is even at the right hand of Elohim, who makes intercession for us. Who shall separate us from the love of Messiah? Shall tribulation or distress, persecution, famine, nakedness, peril, sword? As it is written, for your sake we are killed all day long. How often? All day long. We are accounted as sheep for the slaughter. Yet in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other created thing shall be able to separate us from the love of Elohim, which is in Messiah, Yahushua, our Master. How does the apostle know with confidence and truth? Because we read in Romans 9, my conscience also bearing me witness in the set apart spirit, in the Holy Spirit. I tell the truth and I'm not lying. I believe this is it now. It's this banner here. It's covering up the words. Huh. Oh, there we go. I accidentally clicked it. All right. Well, there we go. Denying self is the only truth, just through belief, just through everything in his word that we have to find out and learn constantly and to do, not just speak and hear, but to do it. It's worthless to just hear it, speak it. It's hypocrisy. It's to be an unbeliever, is to just hear his word or just speak it, not to do it. Messiah did the Father's works. He did it, lived it, not just speak, not just hear. Oh, what have they done? What has the harlot done? How strong is the judgment? How blind is this world, mankind blind, Adam and Eve blind? What have they done to the gospel itself? It turned it into wickedness, hopelessness, faithlessness, murder, unforgiveness, merciless, forever. They are the anti-Messiah spirit, teaching the anti-Messiah spirit, the God-man. The greatest blasphemy that there is to be a God in one's own mind and heart. And that's who the Messiah is. That's who the harlot's Messiah is God-man, the blasphemy. The enemy does all things 180, therefore the false Messiah is Elohim, and the true Messiah is not. Therefore, the anti-Messiah is Elohim Almighty, the Creator, and Messiah, the true, is not. This is the anti-Messiah spirit, the one that came from God's physical seed through the virgin birth, as they teach, the way they teach and believe that, and is God himself. This is the anti-Messiah spirit, who did not come in the flesh according to the flesh, but came from some kind of mixing of spirit and physical seed from the Creator, and not according to the flesh, in the flesh, not born according to the flesh, in the flesh at all. Like we read in First John or wherever that is about anti-Messiah spirit and what its major definition is, which is to not believe that Messiah came in the flesh according to the flesh. This is anti-Messiah spirit. This is anti-Messiah. It's big, it's so big, it's so one that all the branches are connected to that one thing of which Christianity teaches and believes. Anti-Messiah spirit. That the Messiah did not come in the flesh according to the flesh is what their Messiah is. It is. They don't have to say the words word for word. That's what it is. It's what the heart believes. And it doesn't care. It doesn't question. It just doesn't care at all. Because the devil doesn't care for real with any good insight. Doesn't care for the Creator's truth or anything good. It's who the enemy is. It's wicked. Doesn't care at all. Zero. Can he pretend to care all day long as it's not real care? Can he pretend to love all day long as it's not the real love, which only comes from the Creator above? Pretend not to steal. Yeah, create the image of not stealing as long as it's not real. Pretend not to commit adultery. Yes, create the image of not committing adultery as long as it's not real. So on and so forth for every commandment breaking, lawless in the heart, in rebellion against all truth, suppressing truth, soldiers put at the gates, gatekeepers for evil to keep out truth. Watch out for truth and guard and try to destroy it. This is great evil. Who can bear it? Who can comprehend it? Who can overcome it? See how bad it is. It's a lot to overcome and bear and see. No one can do it himself. And he doesn't give too much to anyone at one time. We wouldn't be able to handle it. Like we read, we wouldn't be able to bear it. Messiah says, I have much to tell you, but you cannot bear it now. So in his time for a believer, in his time. But that's applying, that's working. It's true for believers. He has much to say, much to teach, much to do. But concerning whatever it is at the time, you cannot bear it now. It'll come, but just not too much all at once. So how is he teaching? Well, in reality, he's not teaching everything all at once. In reality, he's holding things back until at a proper time. It won't even come to a believer's mind until it's the proper time. That's what's happening in reality and now. True believers have to find out that perfect goodwill for them, because this is a truth. But what's happening at any given moment, any given time with any given believer, how could anyone know that? It's just that this is true and will work through any believer's life. It's just that it's true, not about trying to figure out everyone's life and do this wicked judgment, snooping around, looking for evil and trouble. It's nothing to do with that. It's evil. The enemy can't let people go. Can't do it. People are stuck in the devil. The enemy and the system and people won't let people go. To this day, what we read with Moses is happening and true, spiritually, constantly happening. Someone tries to escape and the devil doesn't allow it, does he? Comes back on them hard because the Father is a righteous judge and no one can just walk away now without any repentance, doing evil for 30 years, 50 years, and now I'm just going to walk out. Oh no, you can't. It'll find you again. It'll come back again to someone doing that in the world. There's a way out of it, but it's not through that. It's not through trying to do it for self apart from repentance. But there is no way out of that apart from repentance. It'll come back. It'll hunt down and haunt and find everyone out. Father finds it out through his judgment. He's finding out everyone's sin. It will find someone out. It'll find everyone out. Find us all. That sin will come back and be spotted and found out right now in this life. No one murders someone and gets away with it from the Creator. It'll be found. Circumstance will just be so perfect that someone can't even escape it. Doesn't matter what they planned or tried to escape and plan for. It doesn't matter. All that's nothing to the Creator. All that's accounted for. It's nothing. Nobody tricks him. Doesn't matter what people do with their carnal Worldly wisdom, if I do this, then this won't happen. If I do this, then this will happen. Nonsense, delusion. Never working in faith at all, trusting in its wood and stone and products and door locks and guns, money, whatever it is, trusting in all these dead things that look like they have power because the lying wonders of Satan makes it look like it has power. Connected to the Father's judgment, getting someone to believe a lie. For wanting to believe the lie, he will get someone to believe the lie as a judgment so that it looks more than real to the one that believes the lie. They will believe it. A little bit of power given to even prove that the lie is true. Pretty scary. Who would believe it? A little bit of healing maybe of something in someone's body to make it look like the pill is working so that they believe and trust in the pill more and the doctor. In utter faithlessness, needing to trust in dead things, thinking that it has power in life when it's actually the creator, judging someone, getting trapped by him and deceived for being a deceiver. So the judgment of deceiving comes back on them so that they're deceived. That's what he does. That's what reaping what you sow means. Someone will get angry and say that's wicked, but they just said something about reap what you sow. A man reaps what he sows casually. You don't believe it or know what it means. Carnal man. What you sow, you reap. That's what it means. If someone is deceiving, they will be deceived for a judgment by the Creator. They are deceived themselves. Comes back on them exactly as they do to others and put out. Measure they measure is measured back perfectly. Trusting in something, some product, some whatever. Trusting in man through these idols and false gods. Then they will see the proof in their mind that it has power because they wanted to believe the lie. They will. They don't know how the Father's working. Have they ever asked anything about his judgments? Reading about his judgments so much in his word means nothing to people. They don't believe in the Father's judgments. Over and over reading about his judgments and to learn the judgments. To be given whatever we're supposed to be given and seek to understand for his judgments and how they're working. They don't believe that. The Father's the one that has power. He's the one doing all things. He's the one that gives and takes away ultimately in all things. He determines. Sorcery is to get someone to believe something that's through sorcery, like a spiritual witchcraft, that it has some kind of power, and it will look real when it's allowed to be given some kind of power so that the lie is believed. But someone should know where it's coming from and how it's working, that their lie is a delusion and isn't real. There's no reality in some object, some dead thing having any power that can't have any power to save, no power to overcome sin or do anything. But because something looks like it has power, therefore it does to this world that only worships the image of the beast. If it looks like it, it must be true. Looks like it's working, it must be working. It's going to look real to the one deceived, obviously. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been deceived if it didn't look real to them. That's what deception is. Watch and pray for what? It's just that deceptive, that bad, constantly. Anybody not seeking to do the Father's will be caught and trapped very easily. Nobody has some kind of power to overcome that. It will be caught and trapped. It's like the Father's people trapped in Egypt in slavery and bondage to the world and to its sins. But there's a way out. It's just not a way that man likes and loves at all. There's a way out. Constantly, daily. That's why we read 40 years marching in the desert. Even someone coming out of sin and bondage is not one day. It's continually, continually till the end. All right, I believe that's it this time. Peace, take care, seek truth from above.